beat is epic.
Welcome to this Epic Life podcast, where we explore the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. We also break down 3 powerful permissions with our guests. These would be permission to chill or to just stop what you're doing, regroup, and find that inner voice inside of you. Maybe you could hear it. Next is permission to feel all the feels, to get as sad or as pissed off and vulnerable as you possibly need to be in service of embracing your humanity. And finally, 3, permission to glow in the dark. It's every bit as awesome as it sounds. I will be your host. My name is Christopher Carter. You may call me KC. Let's go ahead and meet this week's guest. Well, hello, allies. Leo Babauta has written for over a dozen years about his many victories and struggles in creating lasting positive change, all on his immensely popular blog, Zen Habits. Along the way, he's conquered everything from smoking to becoming a minimalist to running ultra marathons to writing 4 books, raising 6 kids, and so much more. Zen Habits has been a beacon of hope for literally millions of people over the last 12 years. Leo's lucid, direct teachings come straight out of his own personal experimentation. Because he's a minimalist, he spares us a lot of the woo and instead focuses on the most clear, proven paths towards personal habit change. He's an insatiably curious person. This served him well in his early career as a journalist, but it's really interesting how it serves him now as a writer, a coach, a parent, and in delivering workshops around the world. He's one of those people who's always asking a fresh, better question, one that creates more possibility. I honestly loved this conversation so much, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. As a longtime fan of his writing, I admitted to Leo that while we were tossing the football on a beach in Costa Rica last month, I had a fantasy that he was my dad. Insert cricket sounds. We go into his long journey of personal transformation and call out the major themes of what he learned in upgrading so many habits, unschooling their children, to showing up to write at a level that has built such a massive audience. We also get into the art and science of asking great questions, designing powerful workshop experiences, and facilitation. This has been a major area of focus for Leo recently, and it was so much fun to geek out on everything he's learning. Pay close attention to what Leo shares around our relationship to uncertainty and how that relationship impacts our ability to change. Also, listen for the many ways Leo reignites his own curiosity and how that powers his writing and his business. Please enjoy this far-ranging conversation with the always friendly and exquisitely chill Leo Babauta. Leo, welcome to This Epic Life podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great to hear your voice. I haven't seen you since we were tossing the football on a beach in Costa Rica, I believe.
That was a beautiful day. Yeah, it was cool to hang out with you. Before that, the only time we had really hung out was at Jonathan's summer camp, and you were too busy flying around as a superhero and singing songs. And we finally got to hang out in Costa Rica, and I'm really glad we did.
I won't lie, tossing a football with you is kind of a surreal moment for me, and I had moments where I kind of was dreaming my dad was a famous blogger.
I love it. I'll step in as your dad any day.
Oh, that's cool. Have you acquired a football since that moment? Because I felt you were kind of really into it for a little while.
You know, I have a football back in California where my stuff is in storage. While I'm here in Guam with my family, we don't have a football. We only have a basketball, which has gone unused for a while.
Yeah, you're a very well-known minimalist. I kind of picture your storage space to be the size of a mailbox and include,
That's right.
It has one football and maybe a pen.
A football, a pen, and just empty space. I just wanted to have a lot of empty space in my storage unit.
That's great. Well, so where we usually start on our show is we explore this idea of 3 permissions as access to our highest expression. You can interpret these however you wish, and I'm really curious to hear your interpretations because I know you're kind of into all of these. These are the permission to chill or to find stillness, permission to feel all the feels, which is access to our full humanity, and or permission to glow in the dark. You can interpret that however you wish. Do any of these resonate with you today? And what do the permissions to chill, feel all the feels, or glow in the dark mean to you?
They all resonate. I think the biggest part is that I got permission from you, KC Christopher Carter. I think that's the most important part. But the permission to be still, I think, is such an important part, or to chill, that I think we just forget to do that. Well, of course, some of us have like a meditation period, which is, that kind of chill stillness. But what about during the rest of the day? Are we rushing through the rest of the day between our sleep periods and meditation periods, and the rest of it is just pure like busyness? And so I think that's such an important reminder and important thing to give ourselves permission to do. Yeah, they all resonate with me really strongly. Yeah. I love for me, like, it's one thing that you bring is this kind of unique take on life and this extra zest that you're adding on top of like old concepts. And it just makes it more beautiful. And that glowing in the dark, it just made me glow as you said it. So I love that.
Yeah, these have evolved over the years, but some of them were inspired by my grandfather. My grandfather, I call him the epic one. He was kind of the blueprint for this epic life. Like, this guy was just larger than life. And I see you exhibiting these 3 permissions in various ways throughout your work, and we'll get into those in a minute.
Well, and just to touch on the middle one, which I didn't talk about, the feels. That's actually something that I didn't give myself permission to do for a long time. I was a very rational, logical person and didn't like people who got too emotional. And so just in the last few years, I've really been giving myself that kind of permission. And now a lot of my work, my mindfulness training that I do with other people, is actually along those lines. So it's really interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I wasn't able to make your workshop at Camp GLP when you were there leading this great workshop. And I heard kind of the ruckus from the outside. There was some music jamming. And I kind of peeked in and I saw people in kind of like Soul Train conga lines and stuff. And I was like, this is Leo's workshop? Like, I was so fascinated. I was so bummed I had to be somewhere at that moment. And I got to experience the workshop finally last month in Costa Rica. And I was just really impressed, all the different kind of modalities that you brought to it. Part of it was for the head, but vastly more was for the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a modality that I hadn't trained in for a long time. And like I said, now that I've been going into it, I've really found how powerful and transformational it is, and just how little we allow ourselves to do it. So thank you for giving people that permission.
So you're in Guam right now, and it's actually tomorrow, which I'm trying to wrap my head around. Any sneak previews on what's waiting for us? Is everything going to be okay?
Well, it's pretty bleak, to be honest. I do have a non-disclosure contract, so I can't give any spoilers. Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to tell you that the events that you've already experienced are just a preview, really.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to say that.
I don't know if you're familiar with this line from the latest Winnie the Pooh movie called Christopher Robin. It's a pretty great line. He said, "Yesterday, when it was tomorrow, it was too much day for me." And
that is so great.
It's so great. It's kind of about anxiety, I think. Yesterday, when it was tomorrow, it was too much day for me. Today's my favorite day is the other thing he said. But I almost wondered if they stole that line from somewhere in the archives of Zen Habits. Do you remember writing it anywhere?
I probably did. I write a lot of crap. No, that is an amazing line. And it's really kind of a mind twister, too. It sounds kind of like a Zen koan.
Yeah. I feel like in this moment where I'm in Northeast Ohio and you're in Guam, literally in tomorrow, 12 hours ahead of me, it's kind of the perfect time to drop that line on you. Your backstory is pretty well known at this point around the internet, but it's just so unique. Could I have you share just a bit of where you were in 2007 when you started your blog, Zen Habits, and a little bit about where you are today, just for some contrast? Because you gave kind of a snapshot before your morning meditation in Costa Rica, and it was super succinct. And
yeah, well, I started the blog in 2007, but that was actually already into the journey that I was on. So 2005, if you rewind a little bit more, I was here in Guam. I was really stuck in my life. So I was overweight, addicted to junk food, sedentary, couldn't stick to any kind of exercise programs at all. I was a smoker, deeply in debt, so that I couldn't pay bills. I couldn't put food on the table sometimes, which was really heartbreaking. I had a family of 5 with one more on the way, 5 kids, one more on the way. Yeah, I was overworked, no time for my family, couldn't make my kids' soccer games on the weekends, in a job I really didn't like. And there's a lot more to it, but the biggest thing was that I didn't feel like I could change anything. I couldn't stick to anything, and the real heart of that was that I felt like I didn't have confidence in myself. I didn't believe in myself, and I just kept beating myself up for all of these failures. So that's where I was in 2005, and I decided to change my life. I finally had to do something. It was like a desperate saving my life, and not only my life, but my wife's life and my kids' lives. Like, I knew if I kept smoking, they were going to smoke. If I kept down all the roads I was on, I was not going to be a good influence on my kids. So I had to do something to save my life and theirs. And so I decided to make one change. I decided to quit smoking, and that was not necessarily the best choice because it's a really hard change to make. But I decided to do that, and I poured everything into it. And on November 18, 2005, that was my quit date. I wasn't going to smoke a single time after that.
Wow.
I poured everything I had. I promised my wife, I promised my little, 10-year-old daughter, 12-year-old daughter that I was going to quit. I had failed like 7 times before that, but I did put a lot of research into it. I made commitments. I joined a group online. I learned all these kinds of techniques. I started meditating. And to my great surprise, I actually made it work. I stuck to that change and quit smoking. And then from that, I started to apply the same things to running, where I couldn't run for even 10 minutes. But I started to do it one step at a time. And eventually I ran a marathon and an ultra marathon. So that just kind of shows the power of these small changes one at a time. I changed my diet. I started getting out of debt. I started decluttering and simplifying my life, and eventually became a minimalist. So just one change at a time, I changed my entire life. And so that's where I was in 2007 when I started Zen Habits. I just finished running my first marathon. I lost, at that point, 35 pounds. Eventually it was 70 pounds. And I was on the way to getting out of debt and simplifying my life and just changing everything about my life. The biggest thing was I changed how I felt about myself. I really felt like I could actually do this. And that was a huge shift for me. And I was still early on in the journey. So it took, more years to really understand how much I beat myself up and how I built this self-image about myself that was really solidified. A lot more meditation, a lot more training, a lot of habit changes. And it was when I started writing the blog that I really started to deepen my learning about it. To the point where now, you asked about where I am now. Is that right?
Yeah. I'd love to know for contrast.
Yeah. So now I'm definitely, like I said, a minimalist. I eat healthy, most of the time, not always. I'm a vegan. I travel and I do the work that I love. But I think the most important thing is that I am training in fearlessness and mindfulness and uncertainty. And I'm starting to open myself up to a bigger mission and all of the fears and anxieties that come with that, which is training people in fearlessness. And so, that's been a big shift for me in the last few years. And so that's kind of the mission that I'm on now, is to change 1 million lives through this uncertainty training.
I know. I'm so excited to get into your mission. I kind of revisited it before this call. Going back to your, the first one, quitting smoking, what was different for you on the 8th try than the previous 7 attempts?
One thing was that I was fully committed to it. That's something that I don't always do. I'm kind of a half committer. And I think a lot of people are like that, where okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change my diet, but I don't know if I really believe I'm going to do it. And there's always going to be but right now there's a family party, so it's okay to not do it now. And but it's okay to do it here. And so I had been doing that all along. That was one big change, was that in that change, on that month, I decided to really commit myself. So I committed to other people. I had accountability partners online. I had someone who I promised I would call before I took a single puff of a cigarette. I started to log everything, all my urges, and meditate during some of those, run during some of the other ones. So I really had a full-on strategy that was that I was fully committed to. That was one major change for me. Another one was that I did one change instead of trying to do like 10 or 12 different changes at once.
Yeah.
I was just going to do this one. And a lot of times we underestimate how hard these changes are going to be. Like quitting smoking is the hard one, but like maybe you just want to start doing like a little bit of exercise in the morning. You're like, oh yeah, I can do that, and I can wake earlier, and I can start meditating and journaling and all these other things. I find that that's usually a recipe for failure. So that was another one. And then meditation was actually a huge one. I hadn't been meditating before that. And I decided just to as a strategy to replace smoking for stress relief, is that I was going to start meditating. And I really learned, by meditating on the urges, I really learned to watch these urges. This is kind of along the lines of permission to feel the feels. So I felt the urge arise, and this is something that I didn't ever want to feel, was this urge without actually fulfilling the urge. I always wanted, as soon as the urge came, I needed to do something about it. But with meditation, I learned that I could just watch it and feel it and not need to do anything. It was just feeling. And it would actually go away after a while and maybe come back and then go away, but it was just a feeling, and I could allow myself to feel that. So that was a big revelation for me. There was a few other ones, but I think those were some of the big ones.
So what I heard from the first part was that you kind of built major structures around it. You had accountability structures, you had all levels of support, a lot of public accountability. There was kind of like the burning the boats vibe to it. There was no going back. Number 8 will be different. And then there was also the being really honest with yourself and taking only one at a time and just being very intentional about that. I love the meditation piece. What I found being a meditator, I don't know, going on close to a dozen years, is that the discernment, I think, is the most important benefit from it. Is just to know when you're BSing yourself or when you're leading yourself astray. You could kind of separate where that motivation is coming from versus just saying like, oh, I'm going to go do that thing I always do, which is have a smoke or reach for the drinks or whatever it may be. So it sounds like the discernment really started getting worked out in the meditations.
That was actually huge. That's a really good point. It was just because before there's all these rationalizations, and I learned my mind, like many other people, it's really good at rationalizing.
Yeah.
It's like super good at it after so many years. And so you just believe the rationalizations, like, okay, it's okay to do this because one big one was it's okay to take one puff of a cigarette because it's just one puff. That one puff won't hurt, which is in isolation, that's actually true. Like one puff of a cigarette's not going to kill you or make any major impact on your health. But what I learned is it's a complete lie because it always led to a second puff and a third. And then basically I was not quit anymore. So I was very good at lying to myself, and just that discernment that you're talking about is just saying, oh yeah, here's my rationalization, and it's coming from this place of really wanting to scratch this really urgent itch and soothe this really urgent fear. Yeah, that was a really huge thing for me.
You're a big fan of the work of Charles Duhigg, Power of Habit, super famous book. He was part of one of your video courses I saw on your site today. But he talks about the linchpin habit. It definitely seemed like a linchpin for you that kind of dominoed into many bigger and more confidence building things for you. Just knowing you could get that one done. Yeah.
So the confidence and knowing that I could do it, I think that was huge. But the other parts of it was I started to learn, like you mentioned, the structure, the discernment on all of that. This was just kind of the vehicle for learning all of that. And then I was able to say, oh, wow, I could apply it to running. And it actually, all of those same things worked for running. And then I could apply it to my eating. I could apply it to decluttering and all these other things, procrastination and writing in the morning. All these amazing things that I wanted to do, I could apply the same exact things that I learned from that first attempt. Just because I really poured myself into it and I was really committed to it, that I really learned all about the things that worked. And I kept doing that every single time. But that first one was probably the biggest learning curve, and it really applied to everything else.
What do you think attracts, I know you're not big into touting your stats and stuff, but your readership for the blog is pretty huge at this point. What do you attest that interest in your work to and that attraction? Is it that every man, I could do this, so can you? Is it just your consistency? Is it just 12 years of organic search? I mean, what do you attribute that massive audience to at this point?
I think there is an empowerment in the simplicity that I apply to not only changing habits, but becoming more mindful and simplifying your life. Just like one step at a time, one change at a time, make it super small, and then I make it very practical. I think that's a big part of it. But I think you mentioned that kind of every man, if this guy can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
I think there's something really big in that I kind of shared my story that I was just as terrible at doing this as anybody else. And yet, through a few simple techniques, a few simple changes, I was able to change my entire life. I think there's some inspiration in there because people put themselves into my shoes and say, oh yeah, I'm in a similar kind of place. Maybe not where I first started, maybe they're further along the path, but they're somewhere along the path that I've been on. And they're like, this guy can do it. And he did it with some simple steps, and so I can do it with those same simple steps. And they can see themselves going further down the path to where I am now. Mm-hmm. And that kind of like ignites something in them. Maybe it's a fantasy, maybe it's some kind of like just belief in themselves that they could do it. But I also think there's another thing that I didn't really understand when I first started, was I had this message of simplicity that really appealed to me, but I thought it was just kind of this weird thing that no one else really, not too many people cared about, maybe a few weirdos who wanted to go live in the wilderness. But simplicity wasn't like a mainstream thing because it's completely against the mainstream message.
Right.
And yet when I put it out, you can change your habits in a simple way. You can do mindfulness in a simple way, and you can live life in a simple way. That message of simplifying your life and living a simple life was something that really struck a chord with a lot of people who feel overwhelmed, who feel stressed out by the chaos of their day and the world. The world's just crazy right now. This idea that we could find some measure of simplicity and just create some space for that stillness that you talked about, for feeling, for glowing in the dark. Yeah. I think just the idea that there could be space really struck a nerve that I think is more common than I believed, like way more common. I think it might be actually the majority of people who crave that.
It seems really empowering at a very fundamental level. Your example and your story is basically, we have a choice here. It doesn't have to go this way. We don't have to live in overwhelm and overweight and suffering, essentially. The other thing I get from it too is this comes up in a lot of these conversations is the idea of hacking things is kind of prevalent now. It's used in a lot of marketing, shortcuts and hacking. And, and I'm not trying to poo-poo that notion because saving time is always great. But I also hear a lot of long-term commitment in your work, a lot of devotion and, steady practice, slow and steady, measured. Has that been a conscious focus for you, or is that just kind of how it's gone?
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, and I think it's not something that I really understood at first because I was totally into the hacking culture. Even when I first started Zen Habits, with a blog like Zen Habits, you might think I'd be anti-hacking. That's where I was. I was into the GTD methodology and
efficiency, productivity, all that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to bring a measure of that kind of Zen mindfulness and simplicity to it, but I still really wanted to optimize everything. I think it took me a long time to understand this was all just BS. We were like trying to optimize and optimize and optimize so that we could like do everything super fast. And that we were just like these like mice on a treadmill, just like running around, basically churning out a whole bunch of tasks. And I was like, this is not what I care about. This is not meaningful. And so to get to something meaningful, I had to clear away a lot of that clutter and not optimize, but actually dive deeper in. That kind of devotion, just creating some kind of sacred space around this one really meaningful task that I want to do today. And really diving in and pouring myself fully into it. Like, how often do we give ourselves permission to do that? We're already halfway out the door when we're starting a task. We're like, okay, what's the next thing? Hopefully this will be done really fast. And so how often do we allow ourselves to just pour into one thing? Really, I think it's an act of generosity to give ourselves fully to this one thing and to be there with it. And yeah, I mean, that's with one task, but this is definitely a long-term kind of devotional process. And I'm not a super religious person. I'm not a believer in God or anything like that. But I am a believer in just the divinity in everyday life and how we take that for granted and how we need to like become a little more, bring some of the religious devotion and sacredness to our everyday life,
Yeah.
to how we conduct ourselves. And so, yeah, I've been dealing from religion in that kind of devotional kind of way of living. Everything we do has meaning, and we need to pour ourselves into it as if it were sacred.
Yeah, the quote that's been coming up a lot for me lately, I know our mutual friend, Chelsea Dinsmore, she used this in her WDS speech. We worked together on that a little bit. And she basically, the refrain of the speech was, how you do anything is how you do everything. And there is, to me, that's the essence of glowing in the dark, is to elevate the ordinary to the extraordinary, to fall in love with even like the mind-numbing, mundane stuff of fatherhood. Sometimes we're just like, will you please just get in the car, put your shoes on, like all the logistics of that. And you have 6 kids. I'm always trying to wrap my head around that. You have double the load that I have. It's amazing. How has this journey affected your fatherhood?
That's a great question. It's completely transformed it, to be honest. Looking back on how I was in 2005 and before that, as a father, I took my father's way of doing things and just kind of applied it just unthinkingly. And it was very disciplinarian, authoritarian. I, spanked my kids, things like that. It was like laying down the law kind of fatherhood. The more that I dove into this journey of changing my life, of finding mindfulness and simplicity, I started to question everything about my life, including how I related to my kids. And to the extent that we threw out the playbook for not only parenting, but education, and we now unschool our kids, my relationship with my kids has completely changed. I've even apologized to them for ways that I treated them in the past, and I had to kind of come to a place of reckoning with my past so that we can move forward in a more clean way. But yeah, we've transformed everything, and I've taught them a little bit about mindfulness, although they're not always super interested in it. But I think it's more how I show up for them with an open heart, fully present as much as I can. I used to get mad when they would interrupt me, while I'm working. I would just turn and kind of snap at them. And now when I remember, I try and turn toward them and give them my full loving attention, because what a gift it is that my young child wants my attention.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be more grateful for those kinds of moments and just show up more fully and open-hearted for them.
Thanks for sharing all that, because this last week in particular has been one for the books in the Carter house in terms of just tumultuous. Everybody's got some sort of major drama happening. All of our kids are losing their minds. And I'm wondering, I'm like, do I even know how to parent at all?
Oh my God.
It's just one of those crazy, crazy weeks. And then you have moments of breakthrough, and then you have more moments of breakdown. And part of the mindfulness thing too, and the meditation is learning how to take it easy on yourself. Because parents, it's so easy to beat yourself up constantly. You always think you're messing up your kids.
Yeah, and I with the picture I just painted there is not fully accurate. There's so much messiness in my life now as a father, and yet, like I said, I have been transformed. So, yeah, there's totally moments of chaos and weeks of chaos, weeks of us getting frustrated with each other. But like I said, I think just the core of that relationship is so different than it used to be.
Yeah. Help me understand unschooling a little bit. What has the value been to your kids and to you as a parent? And kind of what is unschooling?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel really lucky that I get to do it. So, just to be clear, it's me and my wife, and more her than me. You mentioned 6 kids. We're a Brady Bunch family, just to kind of give some background. So we had 2 each separately, and then we came together and had 2 more. And so that's how we got to the 6. My first 2 kids didn't end up unschooling. They went to traditional school, and they did great. And then the other 2 kids, Eva's 2 kids, were in school, and then we decided to unschool them or homeschool them. And our youngest 2 have always been unschooled. But yeah, in the beginning, it was a homeschooling thing, which was basically taking school and putting it in a home where you have traditional subjects and textbooks and a curriculum and all of that. But you're just doing it at home, and you're their teacher, right? But as we started to go deeper into this and read some amazing books about it, and my sister was doing it at the same time she was unschooling her two kids. And so we had this inspiration from my sister and reading these things. And what it turned out to be was unschooling was taking all of that and just throwing it out the door, just throwing the whole playbook out and saying, how do we relook at all of this as what is learning, and how do we do it as just humans, you and I as adults? How do we learn? And we don't have necessarily a teacher teaching us with a set curriculum telling us this is the exact path that you need to take to get from A to Z. Instead, we have to kind of invent it ourselves and figure out what our path is as entrepreneurs, as self-learners, lifelong learners, right? Like we're figuring that out, and we're doing it because we're really motivated in some way, maybe to make a living, maybe because we really care about something. And that's the natural way to learn, but that's not at all how it's done in schools. And in most schools, obviously there's non-traditional schools, but in most schools, it's like, I'm telling you exactly what you need to know. So it's top-down learning, and I'm going to make you learn it through disciplinary action, and you're going to be basically forced to do these actions whether you like it or not, in order to get to this goal that you don't care about. I mean, and of course I'm being real not ungenerous here. There's obviously a lot of good things, and I have a lot of love for teachers in our school system.
Sure.
Amazing people. Re-looking at all of this, of how we're teaching our kids, and what is the message that they're getting there in the school system is like, you need to learn this, and we're going to tell you what to do, and it doesn't matter if you care about something or not. And a lot of kids, I'm not saying all kids, but a lot of kids actually get drilled so much in these schools that they learn to hate learning. Right. They learn to hate reading. They learn to hate math. This is totally a sucky thing that I just have to get through. And they don't understand how like joyous it can be, how much fun learning is, how much fun reading is. And like I've seen kids go through the school system and never want to read another book. And of course, that's not all kids' experience, but that does happen. Unschooling, it's not a perfect process. There's no like, magic Shangri-La unschooling kind of experience, and so they learn to direct themselves, to motivate themselves, to figure out their own path, to deal with the uncertainty that comes with of someone not laying that path out for you. So yeah, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of a glimpse into what unschooling is all about.
Do some want to go to college? There's some of them kind of chasing passions or specific interests. Like what have been their big motivators so far that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, a lot of it's just like, I'm really curious. So you kind of find ways to spark their curiosity, because kids are naturally curious, but we kind of drive it out of them sometimes. So what you have to do is kind of create openings for that curiosity, maybe even with your own questions, kind of spark that curiosity. So a lot of times it's just curiosity and wanting to learn more about something. And then you can make it fun for them. In the beginning is just make a game out of it, make an adventure out of it, an exploration out of it. And so you can do that. So that's a lot of motivation at first. Later on, a lot of times it's just like you and I. Sometimes we're motivated because we want to learn how to make a website or do a podcast or something like that. So you like dive deep into it. So the kids want to do something. Maybe they want to make a YouTube channel about, how to make putty or whatever. And so or they learn on their own, or you do it with them, how to make a YouTube channel. Or maybe they want to learn how to animate something. So because they want to make an animation. And so they learn, not only they learn about art, but they learn about the technology behind it. And then eventually, as they get into like high school age, they want to learn something to do to support themselves, because there's that kind of looming deadline of I need to support myself as an adult. Either they want to get into college, or they want to go to animation school or computer programming school or something like that.
That's actually a good segue, because spending time with you last month, something that comes through really powerful is your genuine curiosity. And I'm wondering if that was something you've always had, or is it something you've had to practice?
That's a really good question. I think I didn't have it as much when I was in school. I had it when I was young. I think it was driven out of me for a little bit. And then I became a reporter for a newspaper here in Guam.
Right.
Yeah, so I was a sports reporter at first, and then just a regular news reporter. And in that, curiosity is like a job requirement.
Yeah.
You have to continually ask questions and dive deep and ask the questions that no one else is asking. And sometimes in a complete new subject to you that you don't know anything about.
Sure.
So all of a sudden you have to be like, okay, what is this all about? And look at it from an outsider's perspective. And so I think that was as you bring this up, I think that comes up for me as the place where my curiosity really got trained, and there was a big breeding ground for my curiosity there. It really helped me later, not only as a blogger, but just in my own self-exploration. One example of that was when I decided to dive into how to change my smoking habit. It was like, oh, well, how do habits form? There weren't these really easy books to like, okay, here's how habits work. I had to kind of like dive into the scientific literature about it and understand like what triggers were, or I think Duhigg calls it cues, but I call them triggers. Like what makes us want to keep doing these things? And how do we start to shift that? And so I started to dive deep into it, and that really served me well when I changed not only quitting smoking, but all my other habits.
It sounds like you kept finding new angles to work it, using your curiosity to just kind of uncover new paths.
Yeah. And one of the fascinating things I've found, so I've been blogging for over a decade now, and like writing, twice a week or once a week for 10 years, you can run out of things to say, Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I've pretty much said everything that I have to say about that. And when I get to that point, I might start blogging about things that I already know and I'm not really that interested in anymore. And I'm like, that's really a good point for me to recognize because it's happened a few times. And how do I change that? So I started to recognize that and start to shift myself so that I can find something that I am curious about, and then I shift what I write about. And so I had to like spark my curiosity, and I really actually love that process now. So I can't wait to get to the next point.
It's almost like your creativity cup kind of runs out, or your bucket gets emptied out, and then you got to refill it using your curiosity. It's great advice for writers.
Yeah.
When you go to your archives page on Zen Habits, when you kind of scroll that infinite list of blog posts, what comes up for you?
I have some stories about myself as a writer, and they start to come up. Yeah, like I scroll through and I'm like, oh yeah, I've written about that topic a million times. So that's kind of a story I have about myself. Is just like I'm saying things over and over, and it's a rehash. I also have a story about it's not a lot of value to people, or I might have another story about how people might be less interested in what I have to say now than they used to be. When I used to do more like list posts and attention grabbing posts, then I don't do those anymore. Fears come up, which is probably why I don't scroll through my archives too much.
Yeah, it sounds like earlier iterations. I think it's hard for any artist to go back and look at earlier iterations because it can be so triggering and confrontational. Like, oh, what was I thinking? Or that is so sophomoric or whatever. But when I scrolled your archive, and I've done it periodically over time because I'm just always in awe of like how much it's the most, of course, Zen arrangement for an archive because it's all there. I just get really present to your journey, like how far you have come. It's almost like a surrender.
Well, there's definitely some judgment that I feel if I scroll all the way to the bottom of the archive and I look at those posts, I feel a lot of like cringe, like kind of judgment. You know what I mean? So yeah, I really like the way you framed it. It's just the journey that I've been on. One thing that also comes up for me, just to kind of give the other side of the coin, is that I feel really grateful that I've been able to do it for so long.
Oh yeah.
I've been supported by my readers for all these years, and that people actually find value and care about what I write so that I can keep doing it. It's just incredible. I just feel like someone should slap me and wake me up.
A couple years back in 2017, you published your mission, and I wanted to kind of come full circle on this. You're kind of coming up on your 44th birthday, I believe, and you published this mission. Could you tell me a little bit about your mission? What is it, and how did you discover it?
It started... So my mindfulness kind of journey was just like simple meditation, but then I started training in the Zen tradition. That's where most of my training comes from. But then I started diving into some of the Tibetan Buddhist stuff from like Chogyam Trungpa and Pema and a few others, training in uncertainty. So kind of mixing the Tibetan stuff with the Zen stuff, I started to understand more and more about the underlying uncertainty. You might also call impermanence, this uncertainty that underlies everything that we do and how much we don't want it. We really want control. We want simplicity. Sure. We want systems. We want everything to be under like just a real orderly kind of life that's comfortable, that has things the way that we want.
Safe and predictable.
Safe, predictable. Yeah, just that's how we want things. And when we get a life that doesn't match that, which we always do every single day, we react in habitual ways. And so I started to see that in myself and train in it and open my heart to that uncertainty and learn that you could actually shift those patterns and actually be not only comfortable, but like joyful in the middle of that uncertainty. And I'm like, man, if anyone could do that, which I think anyone can, go from like these closed down patterns of procrastinating or distraction or seeking comfort foods or all these other things that we do, lashing out at people in anger, judging and complaining and all, endless number of habitual patterns. If anyone can go from that to just being completely open and joyful and grateful in the middle of uncertainty, it's a life-changing thing. It actually can be done. It's not even that hard. It just takes a little bit of training. And I trained myself in it. I started to work with a small group of people, just kind of like playing around with it. And I started doing workshops. You went to one of them, but I've done a number of them now. And then I started doing some online. Last year, I launched an online program. I think you were referring to my 44 program, which was this free program where I train people in this as well. So I've done a number of different permutations of that, and I'm still playing with it. I've learned just how life-changing it can be, and I'm still learning how to like teach it the right way. There's no like right way, but just to teach it in an effective way. I am loving this kind of training with people.
Again, being part of your workshop, it was just so cool. All of the kind of different ways that you got us to consider that and to experience it firsthand. And that exercise, that eye-gazing exercise we finished with, Can you talk a little bit about it? Give the listeners just an idea of what that was, because it was seriously one of the most powerful in-room learning experiences I've been a part of. It was really ridiculous. And everybody we were with was talking about it for the rest of the trip.
To give a little background, I only had like an hour and a half to get to that point, but I basically had to give people experiences of uncertainty. So I did a few different like kind of fun or not so fun kind of exercises.
fun for you, the facilitator. Yeah.
It was really fun to watch, I gotta say.
Yeah, right.
Where I play music and have people like do all kinds of different things that make them feel uncertainty really quick. Because you can talk about uncertainty and how it feels, but to feel it in your body is different than understanding it intellectually. So you had to feel it, and then you had to practice with it and be aware of where it is in your body and how it feels and how you like kind of are wanting to react to it and close down to it. So we did some things that lead you up to that. And then I had to get them to, the last exercise was basically standing in front of another human being, staring into their eyes, which is already uncomfortable for, I'd say, 90%, 95% of the population, just staring into some stranger's eyes. But you guys had gotten comfortable with each other to the point where that wasn't super uncomfortable yet. I mean, at that point. So you were staring into each other's eyes, and then I had everyone raise their arms over their heads and hold it there in a pose. And I didn't make that up. I got that from one of my teachers, John Wineland. And he got that from somewhere else. So this is not anything I made up. And so I started playing some music to kind of get them into a mood, a devotional mood, staring into each other's eyes, holding this difficult pose where eventually it becomes uncomfortable and then even painful.
And you have no idea how long this song is going to be. That was the uncertainty. Like, is this like a 25-minute thing to hold your arms in this power V pose?
Or maybe it's a 20-song playlist, you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really just one song. So there's definitely a number of uncertainties that come up, and discomfort as well. So discomfort and uncertainty are coming up for you. And in the middle of it, I kind of prompt people to practice with that. So we practice just feeling where that is, and practicing with opening up to it and not running from it, not shutting down. There's another element that particular exercise had, which was you are facing another human being and you connect with them in a really deep level as you get into this place of discomfort and uncertainty, staring into their eyes. I won't go into all of the prompts, but
Sure.
You really make this incredible connection so that your heart is fully open to this other human being and to this incredible moment of love mixed with uncertainty and fear and discomfort and pain in this really intense mixture where you kind of get intuitively that it's not just the fear, uncertainty, and discomfort, But those are just a part of this devotional experience where you are doing something bigger than yourself. You're holding another human being in this place where they want to run. And that is something that we can bring to every moment of doing something bigger than ourselves, not so caught up in our own self-concern. The discomfort can be there, the uncertainty can be there, the fear and anxiety and all of the other things that we think of can be there, but they're just a part of this mix, this one moment, this experience. And we are bigger than that. And you can prove it to yourself in this exercise. And it's to me, it's amazing to watch because you're literally proving it to yourself that you can be bigger than your usual discomfort and habitual patterns. And it's not the end of it. Those patterns will still keep coming up. So that takes continual training or ongoing training. Just that one moment of recognition that I can do this. It's like that moment where I quit smoking. I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, it actually leads to full transformation. But you need that moment. So yeah, that's what that was about.
It was really profound. The woman I was partnered with was Juja, and we all hung out prior that weekend. And she was a very beautiful, amazing, open person, but she turned into a freaking warrior during that thing where essentially what Leo was just saying was that what you said earlier about the stories you used to tell yourself and how bad you used to beat up on yourself for being a smoker or eating the junk food or whatever, all that's out the window when you are standing totally in service of another soul right in front of you, where we might not stand for ourselves that way because self-talk is real and the amygdala is releasing this cocktail of craziness all the time. But for other people, we will rise up and transcend and be powerful and stand for them. And everybody had the tears rolling and the power and just the connection, and our arms were trembling in many cases. But that was just, thank you again for doing that work. It was really powerful to receive. It was definitely a highlight this year so far. It's amazing to hear that feedback from you, and I really appreciate it.
I think that moment that you just described so well, the standing in service of someone else, I don't think there's anything more meaningful than that. I think you are doing that every day as you show up to teach and to train and to coach and to explore with people. I think you are doing that. I think everyone listening to this podcast either has that in their life in some way, or they're seeking that. And that kind of meaningful work, that kind of meaningful living is what we all crave and we don't necessarily get. And so I think what you described is exactly that. This is how we create meaning in our lives, is doing something that stands for someone else.
So the last question we always ask on the show, it's basically called isms. And so these are going to be called Leoisms. We bang them out really fast. Okay. They're basically one quick reflection that you would offer an aspiring, and I give you 4 different people. So these are Leoisms. What one reflection would you offer an aspiring dad?
You won't know what the hell you're doing.
Truth.
And that is completely okay. And you're going to love the hell out of it.
What about anyone who wants to publish a blog?
Again, you won't know what the hell you're doing. This might be a continuing theme, by the
way. Someday when you have 2 million readers, you're going to hate your earlier work. Wasn't that your reflection?
Well, yeah, it doesn't really matter how many readers you have. Maybe you have 1 reader, right. Maybe you have 2 million, but to me, one of the amazing things is you can write for one person. Like I write every post for a single person.
Who is that person?
Oh, well, each one is different.
Yeah.
So I might write one for my daughter, for my son, for my sister, for someone who writes into me, or a good friend. But I have them in mind, and writing each one for that person, that's something that we all can do, is like we can speak to that person who we care deeply about and speak to their heart from our heart. And I really think that if you can do that, or to the extent that you can do that, you're a success at blogging. It doesn't matter how many readers you have.
What about an aspiring minimalist?
So one reflection is that I had a fantasy about minimalism when I first started, and that motivated me. This like super minimalist lifestyle that I could like feel really cool. The surprising thing came when I understood that this wasn't about how I looked or what my life looked like or how few possessions that I had. but really understanding myself better and loving myself better. Understanding that I was driven to own things by fear, wanting security and safety, and all these other things. And understanding myself better led to transformation.
Last one. What one reflection would you offer an aspiring retreat leader or a workshop designer? Because I know you're kind of down this rabbit hole right now, experimenting with all sorts of cool stuff.
One thing that was taught to me that you experienced it, I found so powerful, is to try and figure out what key experience you want people to have that will shift them, open them up, change them in some way that they can then take and go and move forward. That one little thing that can shift them. It doesn't have to be a whole laundry list of things, but just one experience. Mm-hmm. And then you work the entire workshop up to that experience. Whether you have half an hour or 2 days, is like you're building them to the place where they are ready to have that experience and design backwards from that moment.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time today, brother. You're just, you're a well of insight, but also a well of experience and generosity. So thank you for sharing all your gifts with us.
It was a gift to me as well. Like this conversation with you, I always walk away from it feeling like, wow, I just went deeper into something, or I got an insight. And that's true today too. Yeah, thanks, Casey.
And thanks so much to all of you for spending a little time with us. If you know anyone who could benefit from this conversation, by all means, please send it on over to them. They would love you for it. Okay, we would too. Also, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Your feedback is very important to us. You could find us on Facebook and Twitter and online at This Epic Life. Thanks so much for listening, and until next week, glow in the